Imagine a sun that doesn't just warm its planets, but actively hunts them with relentless ultraviolet radiation. The red dwarf at the center of the TRAPPIST system is stripping away atmospheres, turning potential paradises into barren husks. We've discovered why having liquid water means nothing when your star is a planetary killer. In 2017, the world held its breath. NASA made an announcement that stopped scientists in their tracks. A single star, 40 light-years away, harboring not one, not two, but 7 Earth-sized worlds. 7 planets, all nestled in the habitable zone. 7 chances for oceans, for skies, for life. The world called it the most exciting discovery in the history of exoplanet research. The headlines wrote themselves. Earth 2.0 found 7 times over. But here's what those headlines didn't tell you. Here's what the data, slowly, painfully revealed over the years that followed. TRAPPIST-1 is not a cradle of life. It is a graveyard. And the star, at its center, is a killer. To understand why TRAPPIST-1 broke science and then broke scientists' hearts, we need to go back to the basics. TRAPPIST-1 is what astronomers call an ultra-cool red dwarf star. It's tiny, about the size of Jupiter. Its surface temperature barely reaches 2,500 degrees Kelvin, a fraction of our own sun. And yet, because its planets orbit so close, 3 of them, TRAPPIST-1, E, F, and G, sit within what we call the Goldilocks zone, the region where liquid water could theoretically exist on a rocky surface. Now, you have to understand the significance of this. For decades, the search for alien life had been tied to finding stars like our own sun, bright, hot, stable. But TRAPPIST-1 shattered that assumption. Red dwarfs make up over 70% of all stars in the Milky Way. If even a fraction of them could host habitable planets, the universe suddenly becomes teeming with possibilities. Astronomers were thrilled. The James Webb Space Telescope, the most powerful observatory ever built, trained its golden mirrors directly on the TRAPPIST system. Scientists prepared for the moment that would change history. What they found instead was silence. Here is where the story turns dark. TRAPPIST-1 is not a gentle, nurturing star. Despite its small size, because of its small size, it is violently, relentlessly active. Red dwarfs like TRAPPIST-1 are prone to stellar flares, sudden, explosive bursts of energy that can release the equivalent of millions of nuclear bombs in a matter of minutes. And these flares are not rare events. TRAPPIST-1 produces flares constantly. Some weeks, dozens of them. Each flare blasts the nearby planets with enormous doses of ultraviolet radiation. UV light so intense it can break apart the molecular bonds that hold complex chemistry and life together. But it gets worse. These aren't just radiation bursts. They're atmospheric destroyers. When a flare hits a planet, it doesn't just scorch the surface. It energizes the upper atmosphere, superheating it until the gases, nitrogen, oxygen, water vapor, begin escaping into space. Scientists call this process atmospheric sputtering. Over billions of years, a planet bombarded by stellar flares can lose its entire atmosphere. Every last molecule of it, gone. And TRAPPIST-1 has been doing this for a very, very long time. The star is estimated to be between 7 and 8 billion years old, nearly twice the age of our own sun. That's billions of years of relentless, systematic, atmospheric annihilation. So what did the James Webb Space Telescope actually find? In 2023 and 2024, JWST delivered its first detailed analyses of the TRAPPIST planets, and the results were devastating. TRAPPIST-1b, the innermost planet, showed no detectable atmosphere whatsoever. The thermal emissions data came back exactly as they would for a bare, airless rock baking in radiation. No greenhouse effect, no insulating blanket of gas, nothing. TRAPPIST-1c, long considered a prime candidate, being roughly the same size as Venus but in the habitable zone, returned a similar verdict. A thin atmosphere at most. Certainly nothing thick enough to maintain liquid water. Certainly nothing hospitable. The silence from these worlds wasn't poetic. It was literal. No atmospheric signal, no chemical fingerprint, no biosignature, just rock and radiation and void. Scientists were careful in their language. Preliminary, further study required, does not rule out the possibility of, but the data told a different story. And every new data point told the same story, louder. If stellar flares were enough, and they are enough, TRAPPIST-1's planets face another catastrophic problem. Tidal locking. Because these worlds orbit so close to their star, completing full orbits in just a few Earth days, gravity has locked them in place. One side always faces the star. The other side is in permanent, frozen darkness. Imagine Earth if one hemisphere was an eternal noon and the other was eternal midnight, forever. The day side would be scorched by relentless heat. The night side would be frozen solid, temperatures plummeting to hundreds of degrees below zero. And between them, a narrow twilight ring where temperatures might allow liquid water. Some scientists hold on to this twilight band as the last hope, a thin strip of habitability circling each planet like a scar. But even that theory collapses under scrutiny. Without a thick, dynamic atmosphere to redistribute heat across the globe, The temperature gradient between the day and night sides becomes so extreme that it generates catastrophic permanent winds that could exceed hundreds of meters per second, weather patterns so violent they would scour any surface chemistry clean. And remember, we've already established that the atmospheres of these worlds have likely been stripped away. No atmosphere, no heat redistribution, no habitability, not even in the twilight band. This brings us to something larger, something that should keep you awake at night. Red dwarfs are the most common stars in the universe, and for decades, the leading theory in astrobiology was that red dwarf planets were our best candidates for finding life elsewhere. If we couldn't find life around red dwarfs, some scientists argued, we might not find it anywhere. TRAPPIST-1 was supposed to be Exhibit A, the crown jewel of the red dwarf hypothesis. 7 planets, perfect distances, rocky surfaces, the exact conditions the models predicted for habitability. And yet, silence. Not just radio silence, not just the absence of signals, the absence of everything. No atmospheres worth speaking of. No biosynatures, no chemical evidence that anything has ever breathed on these worlds. If TRAPPIST-1 cannot produce life with all of its seemingly perfect conditions, then the question becomes terrifying. Is the universe fundamentally, structurally, hostile to life? Are we this pale blue dot spinning around a perfectly average, stable, middle-aged yellow star, so improbably lucky that we represent an anomaly so rare it might as well be a miracle? That is the real horror of TRAPPIST-1. Not just that 7 worlds are dead, but what 7 dead worlds in a perfect system tells us about everything else. And yet science isn't finished. JWST still has years of observation time remaining. The remaining TRAPPIST planets, particularly 1 East and 1 F, have not yet been fully analyzed. Some researchers propose that deeply subterranean oceans, protected from stellar radiation by kilometers of rock, might still exist. Life, after all, doesn't need sky. Some of the most extreme organisms on Earth live miles underground, in boiling vents at the bottom of oceans, in conditions we once thought were impossible. TRAPPIST-1 may be a graveyard, but graveyards, as any astronomer will tell you, are full of surprises. The universe has humbled us before. It will humble us again. The silence from those 7 worlds isn't the end of the story. It may be the most important question the universe has ever asked us. Are we alone? TRAPPIST-1 doesn't answer that question. It just makes it a whole lot louder.